Welcome. My name is Jessica Early, and I want to welcome you. We're thrilled to be hosting author Woo-kyoung Ahn and a panel of students in another ASU Common Read event. The goal of the Common Read program is to encourage first-year students to write about pressing social problems that are relevant to ASU's mission as a public enterprise. By learning to write about such problems as a community, we increase the probability of finding solutions to them. This year, we are writing about identifying thinking biases that affect us personally and societally. This ASU Common Read event is hosted by the writing programs in the Department of English with support from the Humanities Division of the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences here at ASU. Our distinguished guest this evening is Woo-kyoung Ahn. Woo-kyoung Ahn is the John Hay Whitney Professor of Psychology at Yale University. And after receiving her PhD in psychology from the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, she was the assistant professor at Yale University and associate professor at Vanderbilt University. In 2022, she received Yale's Lex Hixon Prize for teaching excellence in social sciences. Her research on thinking biases has been funded by the National Institute of Health, and she's a fellow of the American Psychological Association and the Association for Psychological Science. Thinking 101 is her first book. Leading the discussion tonight is Kyle Jensen. Kyle is a professor of English and the director of the writing programs at ASU. A specialist in modern rhetoric, he's the author, co-author, or co-editor of 6 books, including most recently Kenneth Burke's Weed Garden. Welcome.
Hey, Woo-kyoung, how are you?
Hi.
Thank you so much. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Thank you so much for having me here. I'm so honored and I'm very excited.
Well, we're equally excited. We have so many of our first-year students this fall reading Thinking 101, and it has made such a major impact on how they think about reasoning, argumentation, how to use evidence, how to think through and critically assess evidence. It's been incredible. So we are thrilled to have you here. We're so indebted to you for your incredible work. As you know, we're going to ask a bunch of questions this evening that range from how you wrote the book to finer tuned issues about human cognition and blind spots and confirmation bias and all of those wonderful things that you write about. So I'm actually just really looking forward to this conversation. I thought we could start by talking about your work as a writer. Thinking 101 is your first trade book, and obviously we are so grateful for the time and energy you spent writing it. In ASU writing programs, we often talk about how certain problems attend the writing process, regardless of how much experience you have as a writer. So I'm wondering, what problems did you encounter while writing this book, and how did you solve them so successfully?
So I have 2 major problems. Number one is I'm not a native speaker. So all the students right here, you guys have so much more advantage than I. You have a head start than I am. And number 2, I have not read any trade book in psychology. As a scientist, we don't read trade books in psychology. We read the original academic, peer-reviewed articles. And so I have no idea how to start. And the way the book came out was I was teaching a course, and it was a huge hit. There were like nearly 500 students taking the course, and it was featured in the Yale Alumni magazine. And my editor, who was the Yale alum, read that article and contacted me. And so I expressed my 2 major problems. I'm not a native speaker. I've never written or read a trade book in psychology. And he said, if you can teach these undergraduate students, you can write a trade book. There's no problem. So the way I started was he suggested 2 trade books to read. One was, I actually highly recommend this book. It's a Cialdini's Influence, The Psychology of Persuasion. He also endorsed my book. It's a great book to read. The second book that he recommended was Lori Gottlieb's Maybe You Should Talk to Someone. This is her story as as a therapist, and she was also receiving a therapy herself. And it was hilarious. And I also cried in the middle of it. And it was a very, very great book. So I read those books, 2 books, and then I got the point of it. And and then as my editor suggested, I just wrote it as if I was teaching undergraduate students. And because I am not a native speaker, I have no talent in talking about nothing for an hour in a very elegant manner. I'm pretty sure some students have seen professors like that. I know those too. Some of my friends can do that. I cannot do that. I have to know what I'm talking about, and I have to explain it in a concrete terms. I can't do it in abstract ways. So, and that's exactly how I did in the book. In the end, for the English part, I did hire someone to go through just the surface features, but I and the editor went through about like 11 revisions just for the content and all the layout, each paragraph by paragraph. And the helper only brushed up on the English part later.
That's wonderful. I have something so funny to tell you. So one of my colleagues and I are in the process of learning how to write a trade book, because that's not something that you learn in graduate school. And we got the same advice that you should read Influence by Robert Cialdini. But here's the trick. He's a former professor at ASU. So I actually got a chance to meet him this summer at Star, and we talked about how to write trade books this summer. So you've gotten really, really good advice. And now we get to talk to you and learn exactly what you learned. I'm so happy to hear that. So did you ever in your, while you were learning in graduate school, or even afterwards, even in academic writing, did you receive advice about writing and the writing process that has stayed with you and that you like to pass along to students or other writers who want to achieve the kind of success that you've had? And if so, what is that advice and why is it so important to pass on?
So I was actually, when I was in college, I was a reporter for a university newspaper. And so, I don't know whether this is really authentic advice, but we were told that each paragraph should be upside down triangle structure. So you start with the topic sentence and then back it up. And that really stuck with me. And it turns out that is exactly how you should write the academic papers and everything. And the reason why the topic sentence works is that it kind of helps readers to understand why they have to read the rest of the paragraph. And especially these days, the readers are very impatient because they're so used to getting information so fast. So if they have to start wondering, why am I going through, why am I taking pain reading through all these sentences, then you've already lost them. So this starting with the topic sentence and then going down upside triangle structure really helps. The other advice is that in psychology and also in science, the really top tier journals have a very strict word limit. So for instance, Nature, which is the most, top tier science journal, they allow only like 2,500 words to 5,000 words. So I don't know whether you guys were alive when Dolly the sheep was cloned. And when the Dolly the sheep was cloned, that article was published in Nature, and it was published in less than 3 pages. So when my students complain that they cannot write a short paper, they cannot condense anymore, they want to drag it on and on, I always say, Dolly the sheep was 3-page paper. If you can explain cloning the sheep in 3 pages, you can report an experiment in 5 pages for sure. And that, I think, is a very important thing. So the conciseness is something that I always strive for. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's so hard to achieve, right? I mean, you almost have to write so much just to pare it down. Sometimes when I'm talking with students, and I even share this about my own writing process, that the process of paring down makes basically an act of making decisions about what's most important and what you want to leave with writers. But it's a challenge for me every time. I'm going to use that line. Is that okay if I use your line the next time my students complain about how they?
Yes,
Okay. And I'm going to
definitely.
send them to you if they have complaints. Deal?
And do you know this as an English professor? Do you know the Hemingway's 6-word novel?
No, I don't know about this. Embarrassed to say.
So I don't know whether this is just urban myth, but true story. But he wrote it, of course, on a napkin because someone challenged him. Can you write a novel in like one sentence? And it was like, for sale, baby shoes, or something. And there are 2 more words. I forgot what that was, but it was like, oh my gosh, you can totally see the story. Never used. For sale, baby shoes, never used.
Oh my
Yeah.
goodness. Well, and
Yeah.
then the most recent recipient of the Nobel Prize for Literature, I think, wrote a 9-volume text that was only 1 sentence. So, I guess there's something for everybody. So we're talking about writers. Who are some of the writers that you really admire, and what is it about their writing that impresses you so much? You've already given us some recommendations, but really what we want to know is who are you reading and why should we be reading them also?
Yeah, so that's kind of a tough question because as I already confessed, most of the things that I read in my life are academic journal papers, and I don't think anybody wants a recommendation for that. And but for books, the kind of books the writing that I like is the writers who are kind to the readers. So they really think about their readers. So there are some writers who just write it just to show off how brilliant they are, and they just want to let out what they have in mind rather than considering the listeners or readers. And there are really good writers who put themselves in the reader's shoes, and they can kind of lead the reader step by step to certain emotional, upheavals or whatever, the storylines and so on. And I love that kind of storytellers. So having said that, I want to advertise my editor's New York Times bestseller book. So my editor's name is Will Shorley, and he had written 4 books, but my most favorite book is titled The End of Your Life Book Club. And Will Shorley himself is a very, very kind person, unbelievably kind. And in psychology, there's a term called theory of mind, which is understanding what other people are thinking. He has the highest score on the theory of mind. And this book is about the book club that he had with his mom when she was dying of pancreatic cancer. And it was a beautiful, beautiful book. Yeah. And it also introduces many books as well within the book too. Yeah.
That's a great recommendation. And as you were talking, I was thinking about what you had said earlier, where your editor essentially said that if you can teach undergrads to do this, and it's so obvious. One of the reasons I think I mentioned to you when we talked before why we selected this book is we felt like it just really connected with the needs of our first year writers. And so some of the advice, I asked you this question, and I'll share with you what I've received, the advice that I received. It was the first time I tried to publish a book. And one of the reviewers, who's a very seasoned scholar in the field, said, you're arguing too much. Go back and think about the reader and think about teaching them. And so it's that point. You can tell that you care a lot about your students and a lot about your readers just simply because you spend such a careful amount of time teaching them. So well done on that. It's absolutely incredible. So I thought we could talk a little bit more about Thinking 101. Does that sound good?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right. So on the cover of your book, which is super cool, by the way, it has a small subtitle. Maybe it's an endorsement that reads, "The Prereq for Life." You talk about the importance of effective causal reasoning throughout Thinking 101, but I wondered if you would explain why effective causal reasoning is, in your view, a prerequisite for effective living.
So I don't know whether anybody sensed this, but from the book, but I'm a very insecure person, and I'm very bad at bragging about myself. And I still remember after the first job interview that totally went nowhere, I learned that I need to brag about myself. I can't be just a quiet, shy Asian woman just sitting quiet. So, but I just threw in the subtitle idea to my editor, and I was thinking, oh my gosh, this is way too arrogant subtitle. And he loved it. He wanted to squeeze it in. But then the real subtitle, which is how to reason better, to live better, that one was a competition in my class. So after students finished the whole course, they heard about me writing a book, and I just put out $300 in cash out of my pocket. And whoever is selected for this will win this $300. So one of the students came up with this and won it. So I Venmoed her $300. And so about the prereq for life, it is true. I mean, thinking really, really thinking is almost as important as eating, right? You have to constantly choose and make decisions and plan for the future, like what are you going to do? And it's really, really essential. And nobody really teaches us how to think. We think that we're just born how to think, but there are so many thinking errors that can happen as a result. And the problem is, it's going back to the causal reasoning question. Understanding what causes what is probably, I think, the most important aspects of thinking. So let's use the students' examples. So let's say you as a student just failed in an exam. I'm sorry that doesn't happen. I hope that does not happen. But if you really messed up an exam, then the first question that comes to your mind is, why did that happen, right? And depending on the explanation that you come up with, your next action is going to be completely different. So could it be that the teacher was completely unfair? And if that was the reason, then you might want to consider reviewing the course evaluations of the teachers before you sign up for the next course. Or did you miss any important lecture? If that was the problem, then when you miss a class, you should make sure that you catch up on it and so on. And on the other hand, let's say you also, did a great job on an exam, and you probably want to know why that happened. Were you just lucky, or did you do something special this time? And you want to know the reason so that you can repeat that again. And it's like that at every moment in our life. That is the case. So I just had a little bit of a stomach problem today. And of course, I'm trying to figure out what caused it, right? Was it the latte that I had, or was it the stress from the evening lecture, or all these things? So you have to constantly think about this. And the problem is that we do make mistakes. And these mistakes are not random. They can be systematic. And that's exactly what the psychologists are studying, so that we can understand in what ways we tend to make errors, and so that we can prevent them.
That's amazing. So I've got 3 little girls who are in elementary school now. Do we need to be teaching them to be thinking about their thinking as early as elementary? Is that your sense?
Yes. Yeah, I don't know whether, well, you could kind of catch up on some of the problems if they are, for instance, about to commit planning fallacy. I think that can be kind of a corrected early on. That would be a good thing to do it. And that is something that's ingrained in my children's mind. I have a grown-up children, but even when they're young, I always repeat, there's always something happening. Something's gonna happen. Don't do anything at the last minute. The only thing that's certain in life is that something's gonna happen. So we just don't know what it is, but something's gonna happen. So my kids are pretty good with the deadlines, and they got that in the habit. So I'm happy about that.
That's great. The reason why I asked that question is by the time undergraduate students get to us and we're teaching them in their first year, as you know, of course, so many of their learning habits and their reasoning habits they're not fully formed, but they're dug in a little bit. And when I talk with them and talk with my graduate students, I explain that sometimes the best learning that we can do is unlearning, which is something that I took away from your book as well. These kind of unlearning these faulty causal connections that we make, or the tendency to overlook certain variables in favor of others. So I as you were talking, I was just like, maybe we need to be much more kind of concentrated and systematic about getting this to younger students, so that we're forming the kinds of habits, so by the time they get to us, they know what they're doing, right? But then maybe that would leave us less work to do. I don't know. So in the introduction to thinking, oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. I was speaking of high school. I don't know whether I was successful, but I really wanted this book to be readable by high school students as well. So at least in the AP Psych courses, maybe they can recommend this book, for example. But there's one more thing I wanted to tell you about the unlearning. Yeah. So one thing, I don't know whether it's going to come up in later questions, but one thing that I've tried to convey in the book is that it's not that we necessarily always have bad habits. That's not why we have thinking errors. Sometimes we were just biologically wired to think that way. And if it goes to extreme, then you can commit thinking errors. So that's the kind of theme. Yeah.
That makes perfect sense. Do you know what I think I'm going to do? Every high school student that I know who's graduating this year, I'm going to give them Thinking 101 as their graduation. And hopefully we can start a campaign across the nation. All of our high school grads are going to get a copy of your book. What do you think about that? So,
Thank you. I can sign them too.
There we go. So in the introduction to Thinking 101, you write that you are drawn to real world problems. And what I appreciate so much about your work is that the problems you write about stay real. There's no scenario where you act as if this is a simple solution when someone knows what I know. So what, in your view, are the most intractable problems that people with an advanced knowledge of causal reasoning struggle to solve?
Yeah. So there are too many problems that we have not solved. What bothers me the most is confirmation bias. So this is especially so confirmation bias. Some researchers say this is actually the worst bias we can have, and this is the reason why we don't have world peace. And it does make sense, right? They're two different ideologies, and they're just, not talking to each other. They're just sticking to their existing belief. And so the question is, how can we change their deep-seated beliefs, right? And in my book, I really struggled hard to come up with some kind of concrete suggestions about what we can do. And in the end, I just ended up saying that just give up. They're not going to change. Just give up. It's better to just focus on the problems that you can solve rather than trying to change someone's religion or someone's beliefs. But it really hurts to see what's going on in the world and how different people have completely different views, and they just cannot communicate with each other. That's one problem I don't know how to go about solving. Yeah. So the other problem is that when should we stop persisting? So we live in the culture where we instill the idea to the children and students that we can do it. It's called the growth mindset. Some of the students might have heard about it. So we can change ourselves. It's, our brain is malleable. We can persist. But then I've also seen students struggling because they're persisting way too much. It's not the field that they can thrive in, but they think that they can just go on and persist. But I don't know how to give a general advice as to how can you tell this is a time to stop. Yeah. So I can only provide some kind of analogy, which is what I did in the book, is that if you don't feel like you're really breathing naturally, then you might be doing something wrong. Another way of thinking about it is, we all have some stressful, lives. There is always life always it involves some kind of stress, but if the stress feels like a threat to you, then there's something wrong with you. What's happening in your life? It should feel more like a challenge rather than a threat. That might be another way of distinguishing between the two, but these are kind of thoughts that I have. Yeah.
That's great. So you mentioned confirmation bias a moment ago, and obviously it's a concept and a phenomenon that preceded the emergence of social media and personalized search platforms. As someone who's studied confirmation bias throughout your career, how do you interpret the emergence of these technologies? Is this something that we need to be concerned about? Is this something that keeps you up at night? Or is this something that we just kind of have to shrug our shoulders and say, this is the life that we're living?
So I actually love TikTok because I get to see all these cute dog videos and also all the new recipes that I can try. And I'm also glad that it has a built-in algorithm to keep on feeding me what I like more and more, because for entertainment, I think you can commit some confirmation bias. I don't have to try to like cats. I'm happy with dogs. I'm a dog lover. And I don't, I can't stand there's certain type of music, and I don't have to really force myself to try different kinds of music. And I'm so glad also that they're not presenting advertisements for men's clothing, right? So why would I care about that? So I think those are really, really good. But then it can also lead to the confirmation bias because, you are kind of, trapped in that one track. But I think what beyond TikTok, I think what happens is that when we are searching for information on Google, for instance, we ourselves also do the same thing, like the algorithm. So if we, let's say, you're trying to decide whether you want to go on a surgery, you have a foot pain, and your doctor recommended having a surgery. So you get home and then you Google complications of, post-surgery complications from the foot surgery. Then, of course, you're going to get a scary list of all the things that can go wrong with the foot surgery: blood clots or infections or slow healing, scar or whatever, pain afterwards, and so on. And then once you see that list, you would be very reluctant to go on a surgery after that. But then what you forgot to do is try to disconfirm that search. So instead of just typing in post-surgery complications, you could type in advantages of foot surgery. And then you will say it will get, recovery will be relatively fast and so on, your pain will go away eventually and so on. So you need to have this kind of balanced information. But then you might not have balanced information because that's not how we search. So whenever I Google something, I always try to enter the opposite side of it to make sure that I get both sides of the same story. Yeah.
Okay, that's really helpful advice. So you spend a lot of time in Thinking 101 telling stories, and I'm guessing based on our conversation to this point that storytelling also features in your teaching as well. So can you talk me through how you were thinking about storytelling in Thinking 101 and trying to help audiences understand the importance of causal reasoning and its impact on everyday life? What's up with the stories? Talk to me about that.
So, there are different ways of thinking about stories. So in my class, sometimes when students are like in the middle of midterm, they're really tired, I sometimes tell them a story about how I met my husband, and they love that story, of course. And but that has nothing to do with the course itself. That's just to wake them up in the middle of the class. But then the kind of stories that I use are something that's more like examples. It's like a concrete examples to illustrate some abstract point. And the reason I do that is that's how I think. I cannot think abstractly. And I cannot even explain abstract concepts just using only abstract terms. And in fact, our cognition is structured such that we tend to remember the concrete, vivid information better than the abstract information. And that doesn't make sense because we learn from our experience. I mean, that's, evolutionary speaking, yes, we can learn by reading and, and so on, but that's a very short evolutionary history compared to what we went on with we actually learn the sky is blue by watching it. We learn how the sun goes from east to west by watching them. So this is exactly, we learn everything through our perceptual devices. And as a result, our memory seems to be also more salient, we have a more vivid memory if it's in a more concrete terms. So I purposely do that. And so, for example, I don't know, some of the students who read might remember Monster Spray from the book, and you might not remember where it was used, what that was, but you might vaguely remember that I devised this Monster Spray for my 4-year-old son. And then only after that you figured out, oh yeah, that was about the confirmation bias. Now I get it. So that's exactly how our memory works. So I wanted to put in that kind of a baits attached to each version. So avian water is another example. Whenever you drink water, you might think, oh yeah, the confirmation bias. I remember that one, So I hope that kind of works out that way. And I do that with my class. I mean, there's so many more jokes that my editor did not let me put it in the book, but I'm going to share it here. So when I teach a seminar, there are always shy students who would not speak up in a discussion. So I say on the first day of class that, look, you have to start talking from day one. You can't just wait for when the moment is right, because it's like constipation. If you don't go regularly, then it's going to get harder and harder. Most of them get it who have had an experience with it. And I'm pretty sure this is something they're going to remember for the rest of their lives. Whenever they feel like they're hesitant to speak up, they say, okay, I need to go regularly here. Yeah.
I will certainly not forget that example. Thank you for that. That's probably the funniest thing I've heard all week. So we were talking earlier about the importance of focusing on the benefits of future outcomes, especially with regard to like searching. And you talk about this at the end of Thinking 101.
Yeah.
But one challenge of accepting delayed gratification, you explain, is that uncertainty often clouds our judgments. It's probably why we search, do I have cancer post foot surgery? So I wonder if you've noticed an increased struggle to accept future benefits in light of the COVID-19 pandemic, the outbreaks of unexpected wars, the rapid increase of environmental dangers caused by climate change, and the growing threat of racial and political violence, just to name a couple of light examples. So there's no insurance, obviously, against these types of risks, it seems. And you mentioned the need to remind ourselves of the times when we had the power to make a difference in our own lives or other people's lives. And yet for many people, the recency bias steps in and makes these types of reminders hard to accept. So I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about how we can address uncertainty given the scope of these real prescient dangers that we face. And given that we were often enmeshed in an attention economy that constantly saturates us with really bad news.
So, yes. So if I'm not trying to trivialize what's happening in the world at the moment. These are horrible things, and especially climate change is a huge thing. But when we look at the history in a the larger slices, not just like after 2000, not just this century, but the much, longer history, these things always happened. So there had been always some, pandemics, there were wars, and there are horrible things happening all the time. And perhaps we might have a higher expectation because of the technology has advanced. The humans our culture should have been better now compared to but humans are humans. We don't evolve that fast. Even though phones are getting better, the cars are getting better every year, that's not how humans evolve. So human nature is always that way, almost, So there will be wars, there will be problems. And also, as you kind of noted at the end, the news media, they make money out of bad news, of course. They have to really make a big deal out of it. And once again, I'm not trivializing, what just happened today and in Maine with the killing and all that stuff things. But at the same time, the fact is there are 25,000 children who die every day because of poverty. That's a statistics of UNICEF, and nobody reports about that. So if someone has been killing 25,000 children every day, that is like a huge shock, but we are completely ignoring that number. But the sad fact is, even though that's such a high number, we probably have progressed, our culture must have progressed such that that number has been actually decreased. So in the past, there probably things would have been a lot worse. And, after all, we live a lot longer. There are, many things that are better these days. So I don't really believe in the doomsday theory that we are really living in the worst time in the history. I don't really buy that argument. And some writers like Steve Pinker had written a book that our world is actually getting better if you look at it more carefully, not just listening to the negative, horrible news that you hear every day. So just like the internet search, what I would suggest is that search for some good news. And it might be, I once thought that all the newspapers should be required to publish good news on half of their space. That would be a lot better world. But they're not going to, I know, but they're not going to do it because they won't be able to make money out of that. So we should search those information ourselves, from among our friends, by reading books, other, touching stories. And also this news violence, everything, this can be all very overwhelming to us. But, let's be honest, how much does that really affect our day-to-day lives right now at the moment? Of course, my tax money is going for all these wars for sure, but that's basically all I can think of at the moment. So in some sense, the world is crazy. It's really bad. But the world is also not that bad either. We have beautiful nature. We have friends. The school is going fine. We survived the pandemic. So let's focus on the good news part as well. Yeah.
I have an idea. I think you and I maybe should collaborate and we'll create the good news media source. And then we'll just publish all these great stories. What do you think? Deal?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
Deal.
Commitment to have it recorded. We're going to work on something big.
Okay.
So we're going to turn to student questions in just a moment, but I wanted to give you an opportunity to just leave our audience with one final lesson from your research in psychology and causal reasoning. What do you want us to take away from everything that you've studied and all of the amazing things that you've taught over the years?
So I think I kind of touched on that point throughout today's talk, but always, for everything, there are two sides. Just always, so when I see someone's weaknesses, like my graduate students have some weakness, for instance, then it can be turned into strength. So for example, one of my graduate students was very, very anxious. So she was so slow at writing anything. I mean, she would not show me the draft. She was so anxious. But then that's a strength too. She have never made any errors in data analysis. I've never had a spelling, problems with her. It's her strengths. So it can, but then some strengths can be also it can be their weaknesses, and that's like that in life. Everything, there are two sides to it. Always search for both sides, and then have a balanced life. That's my new philosophy.
That's wonderful advice. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to turn it over to students who are going to turn on their mics when I call their name, and then they're going to ask the question directly of you. Sound good?
Okay.
All right. So, Min, would you turn on your screen and your microphone, and you ready to ask a question?
Hi, I have a question. It's is there another topic besides cognitive development that you're interested in or are planning to write a book on?
Were you able to hear that, Woo-kyoung?
No, I didn't hear the question. Could you?
So the question was, is there another topic besides cognitive development that you're interested in or planning to write about in the future?
Oh, okay. So what I covered in the book is only 1/3 of what I cover in the class. I did think about writing Thinking 102 and Thinking 103, and that would cover topics like moral judgments or creativity, problem solving, intelligence, all these things. I don't know whether I want to get to that. So yeah, but that's I'm still entertaining it. My real research, my current research is not actually about these thinking, not necessarily about thinking errors, but it's mostly about how our information. So we do now get information about our genetic profiles. So you can do 23andMe, for example, or you can get the health report, you can get your ancestors, and how that kind of information can change the way we deal with our mental disorders or medical disorders, or how we think about ourselves, things like. So that might be another topic for the book, but right now I'm just enjoying my my post publication year. So
I'm going to put in a plug right now for Thinking 102 and 103. We need sequels.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so Gianni has a question. Gianni, would you turn on your camera and turn on your audio, please?
Hello, Professor Ahn. I was wondering if there was any intention or reasoning behind the order you formatted the chapters.
No, not at all. They were I started out with the first chapter that I wrote was a chapter 2, confirmation bias, because I do care about that topic the most. And then I did not want to start out with that because that's kind of heavy duty topic. And so I started with a BTS. So that's how the chapter 1 got selected. And then I actually don't even remember which topic was on which chapter. That's how random it was. The only other constraint we had was the future thinking probably should be the last chapter. That was the only thing, yeah. So you can probably read any of the chapters in any order, yeah.
That's great. Thank you, Johnny. That was a great question. Okay, it looks like we have a question from Ty. Ty, would you turn on your screen and turn on your audio?
Good evening, Professor Ahn. I had a question real fast. It was similar to one asked earlier, but were there any biases or topics that you wanted to cover in the book or you had in earlier drafts that didn't make the final cut?
Yeah. So well, I kind of at that point I thought I have 7 chapters, right? 7 chapters were enough for the book because they're kind of they're kind of disjoint topics. Um, if I mean, I thought about adding creativity because that's everybody's favorite topic, but that seems a little bit too different from the rest of the book, so I didn't include that. If I ever write the 102, then it will be the creativity and the problem solving and intelligence. Those things kind of go together. So I would love to do that. And I would also love to talk about categorization because of this MBTI stuff going on campus. I have to someone has to teach what's wrong with that. And not just as a measure of personality, but what is wrong with trying to typify certain people and because you could be also unnecessarily constraining yourself by saying, okay, I'm introvert or I'm an extrovert and so on. I think I'm an introvert, but people think that's really funny, yeah, when I say that, but okay.
Thanks, Ty. What a great question. For what it's worth, Woo-kyoung, I'm totally an introvert as well. So we're all a bunch of introverted teachers, I guess. All right, we have another question from Roland. Roland, would you turn on your video, please, and ask your question?
Hi, Professor Ahn. When publishing Thinking 101, did you have like any personal regrets?
Personal regret. I wish I had a more coherent theme. And now that I've given so many podcasts and so on, interviews, I think I finally figured out what the coherent theme is, which is what I said as the last point during this conversation, which is that there are always two sides of the same thing. Yeah. So that could have been carried through. And that's kind of very Asian philosophy as well, yin and yang, and so I wish I had done that, but yeah, it's gone. You have to, I don't know whether you remember the satisficing. I mentioned that in a book. You need to satisfy when it's sufficient enough. That's satisficing. So I satisficed to get the book out.
That's great. Thank you. Good question, Roland. So we have actually some questions from the audience. Can I share those with you? Okay, so one of them comes from an audience member, and they say this: if someone had, say, 100 hours to spend getting as good as possible at thinking rationally, what should they do? What steps should they take to get as good as possible as quickly as possible?
There is no magic wand.
Darn it.
You have to practice. You have to practice. It's like practicing violin or piano or anything. Oh, you know what? Let me share a story about a recent thinking error that I made, confirmation bias I made as a professor who's been teaching confirmation bias for 30 years. So this happened during pandemic. When there was a lockdown, so I was teaching everybody over Zoom and wearing sweatpants, like 10 steps away from the refrigerator and 5 steps away from the bed. So I knew I was going to gain weight. So I got on the treadmill and I did it almost every day for a whole semester. I did not weigh myself every day. And after the semester is over, I weighed myself and I gained 10 pounds. And I thought, what? I was on treadmill, so exercise is totally useless. And it took me 24 hours to realize my thinking error. Kyle, do you know what that might have been?
I would love to hear what you did determine.
I did not have a control condition. If I had not done the exercise, I could have gained 20 pounds during the pandemic. Yeah, I know.
That's
I know.
amazing.
Yeah. So there is really no like quick and dirty way of getting better. You just have to always look out for it and watch out for it, because we are just wired to think that way. You know, when you go to a supermarket and you found it to be really good, you would not try a new one. You would always go to the same supermarket over and over again, because that's more effective, that's more efficient. Why would you try to find the best supermarket? Why do you have to, right? If what you have right now next door is good enough. And that's the way we evolved. And that is a confirmation bias. That is the confirmation bias. So we can't really overcome this like right away. We just have to be always look out for any potential errors. Yeah.
Well, and it sounds too like one of the ways that we can combat this kind of this tendency toward error is to actually think positively and in balanced ways. I mean, if we talked about this earlier, that if so much of what we're encountering is really negative, then we actually really have to work really hard at trying to think positively about the situation, as your example showed. Is that correct?
Yes. So it is actually very, very important to ask yourself question in two different ways. Oh, this reminds me of a recent episode that I just heard from my own graduate student, my own undergraduate student. He was contacting me. He took my course when he was a freshman, and he's a senior now. And he told me that my course actually saved his life, literally. So I said, what? And I wish I had heard about it. Then I could have put it in the book. But so he had a stroke after he took my course, not because of my course, of course. There's no causal connection, but he had a stroke, and there was some procedure that doctor recommended, and the doctor told his mom and him that there's a 7% chance that he might die after the procedure. And of course, his mom just totally freaked out and said, no way, we're not going through that. And then he remembered my lecture about different ways of framing the same situation. And he told mom, that means there's a 93% chance that I'm going to survive. So they went ahead and did it. And so he survived. Yeah.
That's amazing. So we have time for one more question. And I think this is a particularly apt one, given what you disclosed about yourself earlier. The student says, what is the best way to study hard abstract concepts for class, such as vocabulary when learning a language? Thank you, Professor Ahn.
The vocabularies are not abstract. It's just vocabularies are just arbitrary symbols. Okay. There's no secret to it. And I tell my students, there's so many brilliant students who are struggling in foreign language courses. My son, he is a very bright student. He almost chose a college, some other college, just because they did not have a foreign language requirement. That's how much he hated it. Foreign language, you just have to memorize it. There's no other way. I went through it myself, and you can just use all sorts of mnemonics and so on. Do whatever you can, but but then learning abstract concepts, try to come up with an example yourself. Try to generate examples yourself to see whether it makes sense or how it might actually play out. But it is really hard. I know many of the things that are taught in college are mostly for intellectual exercise rather than without any real life implications. So that can be pretty hard. Yeah.
Well, in the spirit of our conversation this evening, which I've learned so much from, thank you so much. I want to read a comment from one of the audience members, and then I'll close us out with thank yous. So this is what the student wrote. Not a question, but a comment. I wanted to say this was a very intriguing discussion to listen in on. I really like how you highlighted the importance of choosing to look at the good news sometimes. Laugh out loud. So I thought that was a really great way. I'm so grateful to you, Woo-kyoung, for the time that you've spent with us this evening. I know that not everybody who will watch this has been able to attend this evening, but we have it recorded. And I just have a feeling that it's just going to continue to have a major impact on our program. So as a director of the program, as a teacher of teachers in the program, thank you so much. This has been so wonderful. As we're wrapping up here, I want to send a thanks to Dean Jeffrey Cohen and our English chair, Krista Ratcliffe, for their support, and to Kristen LaRue and Bruce Matsunaga for their unbelievable help organizing this event and all the events that we run in our program. They're absolutely incredible and completely indispensable. I also want to thank Byron Echevarria with Macmillan, who is essential to the success of these events. And finally, and probably most importantly, we want to thank our incredible ASU writing teachers who work tirelessly to help our students imagine a brighter future. Thank you for attending this evening, everyone. Thank you, Woo-kyoung, again. What an incredible thing. I wish that we were in an auditorium and everybody could give you a standing ovation, but for now, you'll just have to imagine the amazing reception. Everyone, have a good night. Thank you for attending.